You are listening to the global network of podcasters dedicated to the pharmacy profession. Welcome to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Welcome to the PBM Reform Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of pharmaceutical benefit management, cutting through the noise to uncover the truth. Since 2019, we've been your go-to source for the latest on how PBMs impact patient care, drug pricing, and the very future of pharmacy. Here, we champion the role of pharmacists, the most knowledgeable advocates for medication safety and expertise. Join us as we expose and generate discussions that are reshaping healthcare and explore how we build a better payment system which focuses on advancing pharmacy care.
Well, welcome everybody to the PBM Reform Podcast here on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. My name is Breck Rice. I'll be your host today. And I've had the privilege of working with community pharmacies now for more than 20 years. I absolutely love the industry. Will do everything I can to help community pharmacies be more profitable. And one of those missions is this PBM Reform Podcast, which today I have a longtime industry friend that is joining the podcast today. And Chris, you've been around pharmacy for how many years now?
Yeah, so Burke, I'd say working in the industry for about 15 years. I started out with a primary wholesaler and just worked with stores on day-to-day operations and helping them be better, kind of tracked best practices and tried to share it with each of them. And that turned into roles with BioLite and consumer packaged good product. And now with a software company that me and some friends came up with, just seeing some of the core issues that pharmacies face from a buying and reimbursement perspective. So it's been a labor of love, like you, just going into these drugstores and seeing how they can impact communities and how they work with their customers. I fell in love with them from day one, and I've always been very relationship oriented, and really want to make sure that we have a sustainable model moving forward.
Okay. And Chris, are you a pharmacist yourself, or just always been on the business side?
No, I'm basically in marketing and business. Graduated with an MBA from University of Tennessee. Essentially, my first job, most kids, they worked, delivering pizzas or McDonald's. I worked in a nursing home. So I started healthcare in high school in the nursing home as a CNA, and just really fell in love with just the interaction of patients, and that led into just a career in nursing home administration, DME sales, and then independent pharmacy. But really, independent pharmacy is where I just feel the pure relationship of that customer with that drugstore.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think you and I first met about 4 or 5 years ago. I think you were introducing the BioLite product to community pharmacies, and we really love that product and use it in our own home. And you had a good run with that company and helping that launch that through community pharmacies and get it into the big wholesalers so they can just buy it now directly from the big wholesalers, and then you spread your wings into this software development of the pharmacy marketplace. So tell me how that all came about. Were you a founder there, or did you get brought in to bring in your marketing expertise?
Yeah, so when I was at McKesson, I met Wade Hinkle and Tanner Hinkle. They founded a company called Inventory IQ, which helped drugstores set up perpetual inventory and manage cash flow a little bit better. When my pharmacies that were shopping and working with me at McKesson would say, "Hey, Chris, I'm really struggling to pay my bill," we look at the P&L, the balance sheet, and say, "Hey, like there's probably some variances on the amount of inventory you're carrying on your shelves. You might need to talk to these guys." And these guys did a great job of really being customer driven and supporting the stores and helping them. And we just developed a relationship. And they approached me and said, "Chris, we would like to use our technology to develop a ordering software because we're hearing so many complaints from drugstores about that. Is there value there?" And I said, "There would only be value there if you guys address the full picture. Other platforms don't look at how it all blends together and how rebates come into play and compliance, and it's just a very convoluted mess." And for years, Wade and Tanner sat back and designed our platform. And about the time that we had BioLite launched and this platform is ready to go full bore, I came back into the fold, and now we're working with about 1,000 drugstores on that side of the software. But now we're even more excited about our PBM appeal feature enhancement that we want to talk about with stores today.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's obviously this is the PBM Reform podcast, so we do want to talk about that. Your experience with the impact that PBMs have had on community pharmacies. What have you seen out there, and what does this new application do for community pharmacies?
Well, Rick, PBMs unfortunately have so much control over the industry and the core of the business. Even at BioLite, I would be talking to drugstores about a very fun product, but they were so anxious and just burn out addressing just the buying and selling of drugs. It's hard to focus. You just have so much bandwidth and energy, and you see owners and staff just really just at their wits' end about limited control. So what we've tried to do is address the core issue of the business, which is the buying and selling of drugs. And what we're doing with this new feature, fortunately, there are states that are passing laws that pretty much say, hey, a PBM cannot reimburse you under your cost. And it's amazing that states are able to get that passed. Everybody is focused on federal legislation, federal, reform. And I'm telling you, it's the states that are going to make the movement to create, the future of pharmacy. So what we have done is we've looked into the success of some of these laws and stores that are getting the process down of how to do MAC appeals and recoup money and substantial money back. And we've designed a software capability to help them organize that process, streamline it, and automate pieces of it. Because there's just a couple assumptions that were happening where stores were saying, "Hey, my PSAO is doing that on my behalf." Well, yes and no. They have limitations in what they can do because of the FTC issues with the wholesaler-owned PSAOs. So really, stores think that people are doing these appeals on their behalf, but no, it's up to them to do it, and we want to help them with that.
Now, you mentioned that the states are passing some laws now. How many states, do you know how many have adopted this new rule?
Yeah, I'd say about 15 have really strong enforceable laws. Other states have the laws, but they don't have any teeth where the insurance commission has enforceability. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to meet with each insurance commissioner and discover what the law entails, what the process is, who are the contacts, what are the forms that are needed to fill out, and how we can automate that process for the drugstore. So we are meeting with the National Association of Insurance Commission to do a presentation next month. And we are trying to develop some standardization with this process with each state and help them manage the law and the regulations around it where they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So Alabama doesn't have to suffer the same challenges that Tennessee suffered. Really, the goal of the PBMs is to fragment and fatigue our pharmacies, and that's how they win. They find loopholes, they create chaos, and our owners and their staff give up because they just don't have the time and energy and resources to execute. And that's what we're finding is laws are going in place, but there's minimal stores that are executing because they are just so confused and drained from the process.
Yeah, okay, that's understandable. So with the 15 states that have enforceable rule that a drug can't be reimbursed below the acquisition cost, still the pharmacy's responsibility was to appeal that, and there's some paperwork that has to be submitted. So your process is automating all of that for the pharmacy. And do you also, like, how would a pharmacy know if they're in a state that would even have this available to them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We at Pharmacy Marketplace have a document that shows every state with the law and then the process and the benchmarking for that. I'd be glad to send that to you, Breck, or if anybody wants to reach out to my organization, me or anybody at Pharmacy Marketplace, we'd be glad to go through that and customize our conversation based on their state. And then what I'm doing is getting with the states that don't have those laws to really show them the pathway forward. So anybody that has a passion and interest for state reform or recouping what's rightfully owed to them, I would encourage them to reach out to us, and we will have that conversation.
Yeah, well, tell our listeners how they reach you. What's a good email for you?
Yeah, it's Chris, Kris, at pharmacymarketplace.com. And I'd be glad to meet with them and go through their specific situation and really show them, like, hey, here is the pathway for, the sizable amount of money that you're owed. A typical drugstore, Breck, that's doing this process correctly, it's $50 to $100,000 back in that store's pocket. Just from, hey, you have paid me underwater on this, and now from this law, I am owed back to at least my cost. And the stores are doing both generics and brand. They're able to really identify where the most bang for their buck is. And it's when you're using a software technology like ours, you're able to decrease the amount of time that you're having to, have somebody spend on this. It's similar to MedSync. They started with a very manual process, and then it got hard to scale it to a certain extent. So they had to incorporate software, and we're seeing the same kind of adoption with these MAC appeals.
Wow, that is tremendous numbers that you quoted. What give me an example of what the highest amount that you saw that was able to claw back, and then what the lowest amount has been. That way, pharmacies can kind of say, well, I fall somewhere in between.
Well, yeah, we've talked to stores in our discovery calls where it's $150,000 to $200,000 depending on their volume and their drug mix, right?
Mhm.
So think of your high-end specialty items that you're dispensing. Think of your GLP-1s that you're dispensing. A lot of these drugstores are saying, "Hey, I'm not going to dispense that." Right? They're sending patients away, and they might be losing valuable generics with those decisions. But now, with these recoupment rights of these laws, hey, they know, hey, well, I'm going to feel this, but I have an opportunity to recoup it on the back end. So yeah, think of all the Mongeros and Ozempics that you've been having to dispense at a loss. Think about those hard decisions of, well, I have a long-term patient that's on a rheumatoid arthritis drug now or oncology drug, God forbid. Even if the PBMs let you dispense that, a lot of times with these brand contracts, it ends up being at a loss. So what we're trying to do is stabilize some of these purchasing and dispensing habits where there's not so much chaos.
Yeah, and on the low end, what can a pharmacy expect?
Yeah, I'd say a small drugstore, $25,000 to $30,000, right?
Okay.
If they're 100 a day, they're barely making, making it as is. So every penny counts. And we have stores that say, well, I only prioritize losses above $20, and we have stores that say, no, that's my money. I'm gonna submit every one that is a penny loss. It's just the principle of the matter, and I'm going to go after every cent that's owed to me.
Yeah. So take our listeners through the timeline on when that recoupment happens. Is it something that is a year down the road? When can they see those funds come back?
Yeah, so essentially every state has a process where the pharmacy has a time frame to do an appeal based on the dispensement of that drug, right? So you dispense it to Miss Jones, you're able to run a report, say, hey, that I lost $10 on that, and that state says, well, you have 7 days to appeal this drug, or that state might say 30 days. There are different time frames, and our software takes that into account based on where you're at. From there, the PBM has a certain timeline to respond to that appeal, typically, whether that be 7 or 30 days, whatever. If the PBM hasn't responded appropriately within that time frame, then they are out of compliance with the law, and the state has given the pharmacy the option to file an external complaint and say, hey, this PBM's not in compliance. That creates, hey, we're going to review this, see if you're owed money, get them to pay you, and then fine them. In Tennessee, there's fines happening, millions of dollars of fines that have occurred due to PBMs being out of compliance. But they might approve you at the front end, and you are able to reverse and rebill it almost immediately. So anywhere from 7 days to 30 to 45 days, you just have to follow the process and guidelines within your state. That's what kind of our software is helping with, is taking the manual error, the human element out of those guidelines for you to be able to track and record everything appropriately.
Okay, and you're realizing that underpayment right at the dispensing, right? Because you're getting the paid label, you see that it's below your acquisition cost, so that's when you would start the appeal processes immediately.
Well, yes, definitely you can, Breck. Our software will be able to develop that list of eligible appeals, because what we do is we identify the BIN PCN group numbers that are eligible per that state law. So say it's just commercial plans, and we have to scrub out ERISA plans or federal plans. Like, that's part of what we're doing for the stores, making a report within workflow that they can go in and see, hey, these are the opportunities that are eligible per this state's actual law.
Okay. So you've identified the upside. Is there any downside? What's the cost to the pharmacy to use this application?
Yeah, great point, Breck. So essentially what we're doing is, we are technology company. We charge a subscription fee, and with that you get both our sourcing application, so buying appropriately from your primary and secondary wholesalers, really seeing where that sweet spot of blending those options are, where you're going to maximize your rebates, but also get some opportunity from the secondary market. And then you get this piece. So a subscription can run anywhere from some basic versions of our platform are free, but to have the Cadillac version right now, it's $300. But with the ROI on both sides, it's substantial. I'm really throwing out conservative numbers when you say, hey, sourcing, you can save $30,000-$40,000, and then on the PBM reform, you can do the same, if not more. So it could be six-figure in terms of bottom line back to your pocket, addressing the core issue that you complain about every day, right? There's a lot of vendors and new opportunities, and they're asking you to really adopt new practices. You're buying and selling drugs. You need to be able to do it fairly and appropriately, and we are trying to do that in a way that is already in your workflow, and you can do it efficiently, save time, and save money.
Yeah. I want to remind our listeners, you're listening to the PBM Reform Podcast here on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. And our guest today, Chris Ray, has been in the industry for about 15, 16 years now, helping community pharmacies. And now his new project, which I really love, helps hold PBMs accountable for the drastic underpayments that we've seen for years. There was a recent statistic, Chris, that showed that about 1/4 of the medications dispensed from a community pharmacy walked out the door below the acquisition cost of that medication. Your platform fixes that bleed, if you will, and holds the PBM accountable, but through a mechanism that automates it, right, to make it easier to apply for those appeals. We've discussed that there's about 15 states that really do, enforce that rule, but more states that have the rule in place, then they just need to step up their enforcement game. You're meeting with the what group is it? The National Insurance Board?
Yeah, it's the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. So it's the enforcement mechanism for these laws. It's the group that will be fining the PBMs and addressing the I guess, the end complaint that the pharmacies have, where, hey, I was paid under my cost, and I can prove to you with a valid invoice or whatever benchmarks established through that law, like, here it is, black and white. And what we're doing is we're going to help those insurance commissioners see the patterns in the loopholes that the PBMs are establishing, and really help them address that proactively.
Okay. Excellent. And, I think what I like about what you're doing is actually bringing those enforcement dollars back to the pharmacy, because a lot of states do have insurance commissions rules in place that if a payer, has done something um, incorrect, that a fine can be applied, but it comes back to the state, and the poor pharmacy who was offended by that payer is like, all right, we're still out of loss, but the state was able to apply a fine and get that paid by the payer or the PBM. But your system is actually applying um, those funds to come back. Whatever was underpaid will come back to the community pharmacy. Now, do they just have to come at the acquisition cost so that there's just a break even, or how do you get those extra dollars that you're talking about that could equate to 200,000 per year?
Yeah, yeah, that's unfortunately, Breck. A lot of the times, the law states, "Hey, we're going to bring you to be whole with the acquisition cost." Um, and so, in the PBM portals, they say, "Hey, what is your desired reimbursement?" And you might put $1,000 over acquisition cost, but they're going to pay you up to the penny, right? They're not going to give you anything that is not stated in the law. So really, it is them paying the pharmacies back their money that. But yeah, we're hoping to get this information back to the states to say, here's how the law impact is happening. Here's how many pharmacies have used the platform, and here's essentially crowdsourced information for you to develop a better mousetrap for the PBMs. And that's one of the things that we're going to be able to provide, is just agnostic, neutral party data to show the states, if their law is being impactful. And ultimately, I think that will be valuable, because when we spoke with some of the insurance commissioners, they were saying, like, look, we passed this law and only 50 pharmacies in this state have actually, taken advantage of it. So we've hired support and we're here to enforce it, but unfortunately, they're not using it. And that's, man, talk about a kick in the teeth. Working hard to advocate for legislation, and then the PBMs get to say, "Look, what came of it." But we know that if we can develop a better, more seamless workflow with this, then more stores will enact, and there will be momentum, and then those states can say, "Yes, like, all the support staff that we've hired, now we can support them, and they can assist the pharmacies, and now we have information flowing back to show the positive impact to our communities, and community pharmacy deserts aren't happening." I'm an idealist, but I'm hoping that everybody is going to get behind this: the wholesalers, the buying groups, the PSAOs, obviously the pharmacies. We need everybody's support, so we can really allocate our resources, time, and effort into going and talking to these states, and making sure that everybody's on the same page.
Okay, and so two-part question for you, Chris. What are the key states that you are helping today, and then what is your expansion states? What are those that you're looking at?
Yeah. So really, what we're saying is there's three different patterns of these laws. One being, you have to show us a approved fiscal invoice where you were aggrieved. So that is a state like Tennessee. Tennessee is the pioneer, in my opinion, of this law. They've been enforcing it for about a year and a half, 2 years. That's where we've piloted this program. Then other states like Alabama, where there's an AAC benchmark component to it, or a state like Kentucky or Iowa, where there's more of a NADAC file benchmark to it. So we're really trying to focus on those three patterns to get very competent on whatever way those other states go. So a lot of the Southeast states have enforceability. Also, Oklahoma, Iowa. I think Illinois just passed one. Colorado. So there's quite a bit of momentum, and I really encourage the stores to reach out to us or their state association to get more detail.
So there's a lot of population and pharmacy concentration in two key states that always seem to be the problem states for payers, and that would be California and New York. Do you
Right.
have any solutions, or what's the time frame for getting, support in those two main states?
Yes, I believe that there is some enforceability with California and Medicaid. We just haven't had a lot of stores show interest from California. Everything we're doing is based on, I guess, curiosity and demand from a customer. So if California stores want us to research and develop, the tools specific to them, they need, we need to hear from them. I think California has a component, and we would love to address it. New York, I know that they're still, doing some legislative advocacy. The folks up there in the Northeast, we've actually gave us part of this idea. So I'm hoping to hear back from them as we continue progress outside of the Southeast. I think we're growing. Our relationships are kind of growing out of the Southeast market.
Okay, excellent. Well, anything that you hoped we would touch on that we haven't yet for this podcast?
Really, Rick, I think that the drugstores need to know there's light at the end of the tunnel. Federal reform might be discouraging at times, but your states have a huge impact on what could be a tipping point for federal legislation. So I would encourage them to get more involved in their state, affairs, whether it be through their association or the different advocacy groups that really represent community pharmacy. And just know that there are stores that are having success and stabilizing with opportunities like this, and just keep up the fight. I know that people continue to tell them, keep up the fight, don't be the victim. But reality is they're super stressed, and we understand that. But really know that we're here to advocate for them, and if they support us, we're going to support them through and through, because they've meant so much to me in my career, and I know what they do to the communities and how they positively impact them.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you made that point or reiterated that point, that it really you need to get involved at the state level. I had a sit down with Doug Hoy in CPA about reform specifically for unbundling these networks, so that a pharmacy could actually choose the network they want to participate in, and get rid of the ones that didn't make any sense to them. But the big three are really savvy, and they know how to bundle all their networks and kind of take it all, or you're kicked out of the network approach. So if you want all the Medicare lives or all of the commercial health plan lives, you've got to take all of our crummy other managed care networks as well. And that was the point that Doug made, is it really starts at the state level. You've got to get those changes made. For any real reform, started at the state level, and then eventually it starts to grow and get more momentum, and then other states adopt it as well. So love what you're doing. Amazing opportunity for community pharmacies to have somebody help them figure out what that process for recouping some of that money that is slipping out of their pharmacy today, and so give our listeners one more time your email so they know how to contact you.
Yeah, so it's Chris with a K, KRIS at pharmacymarketplace.com. And I would love to talk to you guys and show you a demo of the software and answer any questions you have about your state specifics. And if I don't have the answers, we will do the research together. So that's my commitment to you.
That's awesome, Chris. And thank you for being our guest today on the PBM Reform podcast. Now, I have some fun facts so we can get to know you a little better before we close. This is just kind of rapid fire. So, are you more of an early bird or a night owl?
I'd say night owl. Unfortunately, my wife is an early birder, and that is always a fun point of contention when I'm still in that bed at 6:30, and she's rearing to go.
And do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
So I'm a Appalachia boy here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So mountains are my comfort level, and I'm an avid hiker in the Appalachian Trail. So I would say the mountains.
Yeah, it's beautiful country. Absolutely. And then what's your drink preference? Are you a coffee, tea, or something else?
Well, I'm going to say coffee until I get dehydrated, then BioLite. So shameless plug there.
That was a good answer. Good answer. All right. Well, we appreciate you, Chris, for being our guest today here on the PBM Reform Podcast on the Pharmacy Podcast Network. My name is Breck Rice. And until next time, stay curious, folks, and keep learning, doing everything you can at the state level to make positive changes in PBM reform. I absolutely love community pharmacies and will do everything I can to help you be more profitable.